So Nilanjana, congratulations on the Wildings finally making it to the shelves. It's really exciting to see the book in its finished form, because I saw it a long time ago when you were first writing it.
Did you see the 2003 short story, or did you see the 2007 finished short story?
So you've been writing about cats for a long time.
No, I've been not writing about cats for a long time. In between I went off and did a lot of other things.
Okay.
And this stayed at the bottom of a drawer, which is to say in a file on the Mac. Actually on a file on the PC that preceded the Mac.
Right. And have you been deliberately not writing about cats, and then they suddenly just kind of overtook your reticence?
No, I think what happened was we acquired a cat to begin with. This was shortly after my husband and I got married. And about 6 months into the marriage, Mara was found in a gutter by my aunt. And she needed to be rescued. Actually, the dog she was living with needed to be rescued from her.
Okay.
Yeah, because she was very small and she figured out how to scoop down bookcases, smack the dogs over the head, and go back up.
Okay.
So she lived with us for a long, long while, and there was one day when I was sitting under the dining table with her, and I was looking out, and I realized that the apartment was a completely different place. You know, when you see it
for having a cat in it.
When you see it through her eyes, you know, at that level off the floor.
Right.
And she was twitching her whiskers, and that's when the first story happened, and then I forgot about it because I wasn't a writer. You know, only writers had permission to write stories.
It is. And do you find that, I mean, you're such a focused and professional writer of reviews and blogs and think pieces and so on. Over the years I've been reading your stuff a lot, and it's a very kind of sharp, critical mind that you see at work there. So how did you find the process of writing fiction very difficult, or a very different experience than writing your columns and your blogs and your reviews?
You know, the way I got through it was by telling myself cunningly, I'm not writing fiction. You know, I would sit down at the desk and at the computer and carefully not write fiction for another 2 or 3 chapters. Because I think one of the things that happens when you've read a great deal and when you've written about, you know, so many of the books that you love, there are books that are classics like Wind in the Willows and Watership Down and all of that, is that writing yourself becomes really intimidating unless you can get back to the playground. And in that sense, what I loved about writing this book really was that the world of the Wildings came first, you know. That from the start pretty much, you know, from the time that I was sitting under the dining table, it was so sharp and so clear. And it wasn't just a question of the neighbourhood, you know, it's set in Nizamuddin, which is this really old Delhi neighbourhood which has history and, you know, a little contemporary bit of buzz happening to it. But it was really the world of the animals. It was looking out at the neighbourhood and seeing that the Cheels had their own bit of territory and they saw, you know, Delhi in a particular way. And there were the canal pigs who I had to save for the next book actually.
Right.
And there were the cats and all of that. And they had a very, very clear sense of space and of what they were doing.
Well, actually, one of the things that I think struck me most about the book was, well, it's obviously like one of the key things about it is that you do get this sense that you are at cat level, and that the world is seen from that level. The humans only feature as these booming, large, big feet people. I think there's maybe 2 pieces of actual human speech in the book. The rest is very much from the point of view of the animals. But the other thing was that I came away surprised and delighted by, really, was that it was such a great book about Delhi. You know, it has such a strong sense of place. So is that something that you were consciously aiming for?
You know, it wasn't deliberate, but it comes from my own history with Delhi, like as it is, I think, for a lot of the other writers and journalists and artists who've settled here, is fraught. You know, you come in hating the city by and large, you know, which is the way I felt about it when I was in college. It was such a contrast to Calcutta, where I'd grown up. You know. And I was combative and I bristled when I, you know, went out on the roads and all of that. And it took me a while to see that the city had a very soft side to it. It has a soft center, you know, under all of that aggression. And it has this incredible ability to do the adjust thing. you know, no matter where you come from or what species you are actually, they will find room for you at some point. And this became inadvertently a love letter. In fact, there's entire sections that are flung away because they didn't belong in this book. But there was an old Deadly section that I'm actually very fond of and that I have to go back to at some point. There was a period when after the metro came up, when I was writing on the metro, you know, particularly when we had house guests. I love having guests, but sometimes you need your own space, so I'd take the Mac and get onto the metro and then get off at various stations. And almost always, unless you're in sanitized, you know, parts of government Delhi or diplomatic Delhi, you'll see animals alongside the humans. It's their city too, you know. So those two things went hand in hand. And it's strange to realize that at the end of, you know, 15, 20 years of being here and cursing out the city and battling it, you actually end up really, really loving it and being protective of it.
But how many different ways of communicating they had? So you have the wildings themselves, who are very socialized. I mean, their society is very well structured. You have the ferals, who are psychotic and twisted and dark. And then you have inside cats, and Mara, who is a sender, and you have cats. You have cats communicating by meowing, by rubbing whiskers, by expressions, by body language. And the link. Tell us about the link.
This came out of a moment with my own cats. You know, Mara and Tiglat. Tiglat is our second very large tomcat. Used to get on very well, and there was one day when I turned around and sensed that I was being stared at by two cats, and they were sitting there at opposite corners of the room, and, you know, sort of staring at me, and their whiskers were up, and there was this very clear moment when they looked at each other and they were like, you know, there's no point trying to train humans, they don't get it. You know. And after that I started watching them, and you realize with all animals that they communicate in so many different ways. We do it as well, you know, it's just that we're so used to speech being the official medium of communication that we don't notice how much we rely actually on body language. I mean, try masking your face and speaking, or try taking tonality out of your voice. It's a problem that we have with emails. You know, one of the reasons why people use smileys so much is because in cold print you're losing out on approximately 70% of the way we communicate.
Right.
You know, cats on the other hand just acknowledge it. That's all.
So they can link with each other as a group, like a sort of Facebook group, and they can link with individuals across.
I actually use the internet in my mind as a way of thinking about this. You know, one of the more mysterious things about animals is you don't really know how instinct is passed down, or what goes through an animal's mind when he or she decides that you're safe, you know, you can be trusted. And part of this was just the idea, I mean, Facebook and internet are very good ways to explain it. But let's say that there will always be, because they're such territorial creatures, there'll always be a link within the neighborhood, right? Whatever that neighborhood is. And for cats it can be really large, you know, or it can be a tiny little four-building set of places. And beyond that, there'll be the wider link, you know, which is the larger pool of universal cat knowledge.
Right.
That's one that I'm going to explore in the second book a little bit, you know, where the Goa assassin cat and the Sikkim witch cat and all of that join the fray.
Right, right. And Mara, the little kitten who is able to send, almost like astrally project herself out into the world, and doesn't know how strong she is. One of my favourite characters. Is she going to reappear in the?
She's the key player in the second book, really. You know, in the first book we were following the entire clan, and the second book too, without giving very much away, revolves around these two as they grow up. Mara, you know, the kitten who has amazing powers that are well within the norm for cats, but that are unusual and that she has to struggle with. She also struggles with the fear of the outside. You know, she has a genuine terror of going out. And Southpaw, who's growing up in time to perhaps, you know, become a kind of clan leader, but in a time of great darkness for the animals of Delhi. And that's where we're taking it.
Great. Well, I look forward to that hugely, because one of the other things that I'd just like to end with is that it's an incredible page turner. I mean, it's a really, really good plot. And I really wanted to find out what happened, and there are moments of such high drama and also tenderness. I felt basically very attached to the characters and I didn't want to leave them where they got left at the end of the book, so it's great to know that they're coming back for another one.
That from Roy to Roy is truly wonderful. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.